This week's Four Questions Journalist Spotlight is brought to you by Leff's Atlanta Media, Atlanta's best journalist database. Subscribe at leffsatlantamedia.com.
Welcome to the next version of our Four Questions Journalist Spotlight. We are talking today with Pamela Kirkland from Georgia Public Broadcasting. Good morning, Pamela.
Good morning.
Or afternoon. Depends on when people are watching, because they watch or listen all the time. So it's morning somewhere, right?
Exactly.
Well, so I know you're Pamela on air. I may go with Pam sometimes just for, because radio, you kind of got to save every half second here and there, right?
Exactly.
That's right. Tell me a little bit first about what your role is at GPB, and then a little bit about how you got there.
Yeah, so I am the host of Morning Edition on GPB. So you'll often hear me alongside Steve Inskeep, Michelle Martin, Layla Fadel, A. Martinez, and we're covering all of the top headlines around the country. But for me, it's the local and Georgia stories that we're focused on. All of this stuff to help you get ready for your day. Hopefully some stuff that you maybe have learned for the first time. I've learned a lot in terms of some of the stories we've been reporting on that are just little factoids I never knew about the state, which is very cool. And, we are hopefully driving the day and getting you up to speed on any news that's happened overnight and keeping you on top of some of the biggest stories that are going on, which there's a lot of news happening right now.
There is a little bit in Georgia happening. So what time can folks hear you?
So actually, you'll be able to hear Morning Edition from 5 to 10 a.m. starting June 3rd. Right now, we're on the air from 5 to 9, but in a couple of weeks, you'll get a whole extra hour of Morning Edition.
Okay, great. And are you on constantly, or do you you're on cut-ins here at different points?
I break in about every 15 minutes or so to say good morning and let you know I'm here and what's going on, and get you prepped.
Okay, very good. So, talk a little about your career path. I know you were first immediately over at CNN for a couple of years before that, but kind of walk us through kind of your journalism road that brought you to GPB.
Sure. So I actually started my career in radio. I worked at Sirius XM Radio for about 6 years. And I worked on a channel called POTUS, which was all politics all the time. From there, I worked at the Washington Post as a video producer, video editor, and doing some on-camera stuff for them in their digital space. And I transitioned over to the PBS NewsHour for the 2016 presidential election. Had a great time working there and getting my feet wet in public media. And CNN and the job there is what moved me down here to Atlanta. So I've been in Georgia for about 6 years now, and consider it home at this point.
And I know you're a University of Pittsburgh grad, right?
Yes, proud Pitt Panther.
Okay. Very good. I was going to ask, what's the mascot? Pitt Panther. Okay. Now I know. Wasn't Georgia State's the Panthers too, isn't it?
Yeah.
So there we go. So there's some kind of connection there. I know Georgia State should give you a call. Okay. So you talked a little bit about kind of what makes GPB different, but what makes a story interesting to you personally and to GPB that is different from what you might find, say, on WSB radio or WABE, which is our other NPR affiliate here in Atlanta. But what makes GPB different?
So I think the really cool thing about GPB is that you're going to hear stories that you're not going to hear anywhere else. Our newsroom is full of super talented reporters. Our team that works on All Things Considered is also just really, really talented and really great at finding voices that you may not have heard of. Our reporter, Grant Blankenship, has been working on the Ogmulgee Mounds, which should soon be Georgia's very first national park. And it's really, really important to the Creek Nation, the Muskogee Creek Nation, and what it means for them. But he's been reporting on this story for years. So now that we're at the point where it is set to become a national park, it is top of mind. It's become a national headline. But, GPB's been reporting on this in the background for a really long time. So you're going to get that really in-depth, really detailed reporting that you might not hear other places. And I had said, I learned a lot about Georgia history. I moderated a conversation and we did a segment on the explosion at the thiokol plant in southwestern Georgia in, I think it was in 1976. So forgive me if I've got the year wrong. I had never heard about it. I never knew about any of the implications or what came from it, or that the thiokol explosion and kind of the ties to the Challenger explosion that we all know about, and depending on your age, maybe witnessed watching on TV. This state is rich in history, in news, and I find that a lot of the stories that GPB spotlights are ones that not only are just really cool and interesting to learn, but are really a public service and things that people should know about.
And I think it's worth mentioning, Grant is in the Macon area, right?
Yes.
So,
Yep.
and you have reporters in other parts of the state too, is that correct?
Exactly. So we've got our Macon bureau. So Grant Blankenship and Sophie Gratis are based out of there. We have a reporter in Savannah. Benjamin Payne is out there for us. And a lot of our reporters are here in Atlanta, but we're all over the place. So it's primary election day. We've got our Sarah Callis is in Villa Rica talking to voters this morning, and she'll just kind of be crisscrossing all over the place to keep us up to date and with what people are saying.
Yeah, Georgia's a hotbed. It's an important state in the election process this year again. So I think we'll see lots of coverage locally and probably the national folks down here too, as we see how close Georgia gets to being the game changer, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've got the first presidential debate happening in Midtown.
That's true. That's over. That's a great opportunity for CNN to showcase their brand new facilities over there, right?
Yeah, it should be very cool.
Yeah, I haven't been over there in years and years, so I don't. I've kind of seen some inside pictures of what the studios look like, but of course, no one's going to get in there for the debate anyway, right?
Yeah. That's the funny thing about the debates. The journalists aren't actually allowed into the debate hall. We just kind of watch it on a screen like everybody else, but we feel like we're there.
Yeah, well, we do that with the Atlanta Press Club debates too. We have there's a room where everybody watches the debates, and then there's kind of the Q&A after, so people can get kind of a personal interaction. But you got to moderate one of the debates this year, right, for the Press Club?
I did. I had the chance to moderate the debate for the 6th Congressional District, and popped in for a second debate as well.
Oh, that's right. We had a little bit of somebody's not here. Wait, Howell's here. Can you do another one? That's right. Don't leave yet. Don't leave yet. Not so fast. Not so fast. Hey, the press code does a great job with those debates, and if you're still interested in the candidates, still this will air after the primary, but you can still go and see what the folks said. If they made it past the primary to the general election, you can still look and see what they have to say. Are there particular topics that interest you personally that you're following or that you want to follow kind of down the road a little bit?
I mean, I grew up in DC, so I hate to be cliche, but I love politics. I've always loved covering politics. I've covered every election since 2008, and I plan to continue doing that. So definitely interested in that. I also really am interested in education stories. I think there's a lot of really interesting things happening in that space. And I think it's another area where people need to know what's going on, the more informed that you are, and, policies, proposals that are going to affect the education of our kids it's very important, and important to me as a mom too. And I love historical stuff. Like I mentioned, just really cool Georgia stories. I'm a history buff, so anything that educates me while I can also report, I think is really fun.
Yeah, history is amazing, and once you really delve into it, there's a lot that you think, why didn't we know that before? Yeah. Okay, so what's the best way for folks to reach you if they have what they think is interesting story idea?
Yeah, we love, if you've got a unique study, unique voices, insight, stories. So you can always reach me at pkirkland@gpb.org is my email. You can find me on Twitter, Pamela Kirkland. It's just my name, very easy. Instagram, Facebook, however you want to get in touch. I always open to story pitches.
Excellent. Oh, and we should talk a little bit about it. I know GPB has a really huge reach statewide, and I don't know if you have the numbers in your head, but how many stations, what percentage of the population reach? Do you know that off the top of your head? If not,
Well, we're a 20 station radio network.
Okay.
So that is all of Georgia Public Broadcasting as far as the radio stations go. Obviously, we also have the TV component too. So we've got those television stations broadcasting around the state. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but the cool thing about GPB is if you make sure to turn your radio dial as you're traveling through the state, you can hear us all the way from the North Georgia mountains down to Jacksonville. So there's no loss of coverage. And actually, I know the CEO has been working on making sure we have towers up in some of the spottier areas. And so that's a big initiative that GPB is pushing right now, just to make sure that clear, consistent coverage literally is blanketing the state.
Yeah, I've got there's a graphic that I've seen that has each area and a big circle. So I know the circles overlap and there's a good portion. So I may throw that graphic in here somewhere when in the post-production, as they say. Because I know you guys cover, almost like you said, there's almost nowhere in the state where you can't hear your broadcast if you're trying to listen, right? And Of course, if you're trying to listen online, that website is?
Yes, gpb.org is where you can find us online, streaming all the time.
And if you're listening on one of those old-fashioned radio things where you got to figure out the frequency, what's that do?
We are 88.5 on your dial if you're listening to terrestrial radio.
There you go. All right. So now we get to the really hard question. So this is always the hardest question that people ask. So what is the coolest thing about Pamela that people might not know?
All right. So I thought about this for a minute. One thing people might not know is I used to be a really big runner. I've done 2 marathons and 10 half marathons in, I guess, over the course of like 10 years or so. I have a 2-year-old, so the running has been few and far between the past couple years, but I'm trying to get back into it. Other than that, I love to cook when I have time. I love getting a new recipe and testing it out and, tweaking it with my own special spices. Again, the 2-year-old gets in the way of that, and he's a very particular eater. So lots of chicken nuggets and macaroni and cheese for dinner.
Yeah,
if I have a chance to cook, I love
to. There is that, but they hopefully grow out of that somewhat.
Yeah,
and it's fun to get the little ones kind of involved in the cooking it when they maybe not quite 2 years old, but when they get a little older, they help in the kitchen and they feel like a part of it, right?
Exactly. I've got him on dishwashing duty for now.
Oh, there you go.
Safe.
That's important. That's a good place to start. Yeah, if I get my kids are in their 20s, but dishwashing duty is still a challenge for them. when they're home, it's like, what, you call that clean? Yeah, it's cleanish, Dad.
Right.
That's clean. That's clean.
I don't see anything on the plate.
It's as clean as my college dorm. So yeah, that's legit, right?
Yeah.
Do you have a genre? Do you like a kind of food that you like to cook?
A little bit of everything. I really like cooking Indian food.
Okay. We found there was a place in town, I think over in Clarkston, and it was like Afghani food. And it was like a rice dish with pistachios, and I can't remember off the top of my head what it was called, but it was an incredible dish. I think it had lamb in it and vegetables, but it's like a traditional Afghani Middle Eastern dish that it's like when you get married, you're supposed to make this for your husband or something like that, or nowadays maybe the husband makes it for the wife. I don't know, probably more the other way. But anyway, it was really good. The pistachios were the key, I think. All right. So next couple of questions are kind of what we call the lightning round. So you don't have to get too deep into detail, but just kind of short answers to a couple of these things. So first one is, what's the last book you've read or the last podcast you've listened to? And your podcast cannot be a GPP podcast.
Okay.
She's like, oh crap, that was going to be my answer.
Darn. Last podcast would be Making Space with Hoda Kotb.
Okay. Favorite local restaurant?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Let's go with, oh man, I'm blanking. Come on, Pam. You can tell how much I get out on the town now with the schedule.
With the schedule and little kids, right?
Exactly. I'll give you my
Chucky?
favorite lunchtime place for
Okay.
now, which
All right.
is Upbeat over on I think Upbeat's over on Howell.
Okay. Yeah, I tell you, over there where you guys are at off 14th Street, there's a ton of great restaurants if you go kind of left out the entrance there and go that way.
Yeah.
Um, and of course, you got the Silver Skillet there, which is always kind of, you know,
Oh yeah. Can't go
uh,
wrong with the silver
can't go
skillet.
wrong there. Okay. Favorite guilty pleasure?
Ooh. It used to be watching Real Housewives. I've kind of fallen off on that as it's changed and progressed over the years. Um, yeah. Other than that, favorite guilty pleasure.
All right, we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that.
Yeah.
Okay. What's a local getaway? And this could be, maybe this is a, before we had kids, this was my favorite getaway. Now my
I
favorite getaway is anywhere the kids are not.
yeah, pretty much. Favorite local getaway, Jekyll Island.
Oh, that's a good one.
It's beautiful out there.
All right. And favorite non-work hobby?
Favorite non-work hobby, volleyball when I get a chance to
Okay.
play.
All right. Is there a league or something, or church league or something that you like? That's usually
Just like little rec league for people like me who play every few years.
Yeah. I played once upon a time. I was not the tall guy in the front. I was the short guy in the back. So my tall friends were the spikers, but I could contribute.
Yeah.
Um, all right. So the other thing I always like to talk about, are there kind of charities or nonprofits that you like, that you would like to volunteer with, or that you have volunteered with in the past that you'd like to plug a little bit?
So there's one nonprofit that is close to my heart because it's my community that I live in, Village Forward, which is part of the Stone Mountain Village community and just kind of helping to revitalize that area, to get new businesses into that area, and to kind of talk about the history of the area too. And they're doing a lot of good work.
Okay. Um, let's see, what's the website? I always like to send people there to the website.
Let's see. I'm pretty sure they're villageforward.org.
Okay, I'll double check, and usually I'll do a little scroll on the bottom that says, "Here's the website." So if you look down, and you should be able to see that right now. There it is. Oh, there it is. Look, there it is. Showing across. There you go. I love. Yeah, you gotta love post production, right? You can do all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
it's the best. I mean, working in TV, post-production saves your life all the time.
You're thinking into the future, going, "Here's what it's going to look like later." Um, okay, so today is a primary day, and when this airs, the primary day will be a couple of days past. But what do you see as kind of the key issues that are going to be on the ballot in Georgia in November, other than
Yeah.
obviously a presidential election? But for Georgians, what's going to be on the ballot that people really should be worried about and thinking about?
I mean, we've been talking to voters, and I really feel like it's still economic issues. The economy's doing pretty well, depending on the indicators that you're looking at. But I think for a lot of families, it doesn't feel that way, especially if you're in charge of grocery shopping for your house or if you're in charge of getting gas for the cars. Everything with inflation feels so much more expensive than it used to be even just a couple of years ago. And so I think those are the issues that are really going to drive a lot of people in this election as we get closer to the general.
It's interesting. I mean, gas prices are such an interesting barometer. People look at it and they have a perception that, oh, gas prices are high, or they're not so bad, and it's seasonal. It goes up and down depending on the seasons, and as you said, it's inflation adjusted, so you can look at it that way. And it's dependent on stock markets, and it's an interesting thing to look at. I mean, the groceries, yeah. I mean, that has been there's been a lot of conversation about that in terms of, is it inflation? Are the companies inflating prices? I've seen a lot of commentary that it's a little bit of both. The stores decided, hey, we can charge a little more for this, so even though our costs have gone down, we're going to keep charging more for it because people have gotten used to it. So there's that. Um,
Yeah.
what about I guess gun issues and abortion issues continue to be hot in Georgia. Are either of those going to be on the ballots for this fall?
No, not for us. We won't have any referendums or ballot items like that.
Okay. Yeah, so I did the ballot I chose today had a lot of kind of testing the water kind of questions about those issues, or they're non-binding questions that don't mean anything, just kind of the parties trying to see what people think about it. But it's interesting to see those on at least on the primary ballots, and be interesting to see what people say about them. If that when that data comes out, I don't know if that's tonight or tomorrow or in the coming weeks, whenever that comes out.
Yeah.
That's always interesting. Yeah, one of the things I always find interesting about GPB is that you focus on issues that aren't just Metro Atlanta. And I tell people, when you're thinking about pitching PR people, if you're pitching stories to GPBs, don't think about GPB the same way you think about other Atlanta-based radio stations, because the audience is so much wider and so much more diverse than, I don't say just Metro Atlanta. I've been following Sophie's rural healthcare coverage, and I think that's just a great beat to have someone focused on, because that's such a
Yeah.
important issue around the state. Those of us in Atlanta get used to, having hospitals close by and having 100 dentists within a block of each other, and having great internet service. But when you're out in Waycross or some of the smaller markets, it's not a given that you're going to have really good internet, or
Yeah.
that you're going to have a doctor that's not 45 minutes away, right?
Yep, they're pushing for changes in the VA system just because there are so many veterans who live in rural areas. And here in Georgia, it's the same case. You're living in a rural area, you can't get to the Atlanta VA very easily. And there aren't a lot of community health centers that you can go to either to get that health coverage you're looking for. So they're looking at making some adjustments there to make ease of access to care easier for vets.
Yeah, and that's been an ongoing issue, just that how quickly veterans can get in to get health care.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. What have we not talked about? I feel like we've covered kind of a lot of ground here in 20 minutes. Anything? I was asked that. What have I not asked that you want to talk about? Kind of question
Yeah.
at the end. What are we not talking
Always
about,
my
Pamela?
favorite.
What are we not talking
Always
about?
one of my favorites to end with. I mean, I think that's it for me. I'll say, I guess family wise, my dad was a big radio guy. Actually last year he celebrated his 50th anniversary working in radio. He was always, he's on the music side. So he would DJ, he was program director for stations in New York and San Francisco and LA and Detroit and all over the place. So I always joke that I'm the nerdy one in the family. Everybody else has much cooler jobs than me, and then I'm just the news nerd.
Well, Georgia's gone through a lot of iterations of having news radio, and some of it's lasted a long time, and some of it's had its day and faded. I mean, WGST was a great news station for a long time, and now is a kind of an iHeart station, but doesn't have as much of its original programming. WSB is still doing really well.
Yep.
But then you had, 106.7 that tried an all news format for a few years and didn't make it. And now they're not Korean. I can't remember what their format is. K-pop, K-love, something like that. Something with a K, but they're not news anymore.
Yeah.
But then you got Georgia News Network, which does a really good job of also feeding radio stations around the state. But
Yep.
We find when we go to a lot of cities around the state, there's really not a whole lot of locally produced radio news. They're taking it from GNN or GPB or AP radio, that kind of thing. But so many markets just don't have those local people who are out on the streets getting the news. Sometimes there's partnerships with local TV and they'll pull it that way. But I would say probably the last 10 years, it's really gotten worse, which That's why it's important for people to be able to find GPP on their radio dials, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's what makes our work more important, because for the places that don't have local coverage, we hope that we can provide some of that, at least by being able to get to, every corner of the state.
Yeah. All right. We'll close out with a shout out to the boss, Mary Lynn Ryan. Hey, Mary Lynn.
Yes. Shout out to ML.
Shout out to ML. All right. We've been talking with Pamela Kirkland with Georgia Public Broadcasting on the radio side. You can catch Pamela in the mornings from 5 to 9 and soon from 5 to 10 on GPB Radio, on your internet dial, or on the air at 88.5 FM. Thank you, Pamela.
Thank you so much.
Right. We'll see everybody next week. And as always, if you want to find our archive of this, go to YouTube or Apple Podcasts and find our archive of 4 Questions Journalist Spotlights. And as always, go to leffsatlantamamedia.com for our database of Atlanta media. Thanks, everybody.